my top 5 list, my weekly list, I'm going to do the top 5 guys that I think are the most underrated players in the league right now. Now, this is such a subjective list because I'm basing it off of what I think the perception of this player is in the league from fans, other players, whatever, how this guy is talked about versus who I think he is as a player and how good I think he is. Now, you and I are probably going to disagree on some of these. I'm sure there's going to be guys that you think that I've missed or guys that you think that I have on this list that do maybe get enough credit or whatever, but I think that's the beauty of the list. So instead of doing the honorable mentions like I do to start, I'm not going to do any honorable mentions. We'll talk about those afterwards because I think you're going to bring up a bunch of names that are probably going to that I don't have on my list that you'll probably bring up. So before I get into this, before I get into this, what do you got to say?
Yeah. Okay. So what is underrated to you? Is it you think he's underrated, which is like it's kind of weird for me to understand if you think a guy is good or not. There's no rating system for Ceruti, right? Nope. It's just I think this guy's good, but you think other people don't think he's good, and then when you say other people, is it coaches? Is it fans? Is it media? Or is it players? That's what I really want to understand. Underrated.
For me, it's the perception of this player. So like and perception is usually fueled by fans and media, right? So because I don't talk to players. I talk to ex-players or whatever, but I don't have a relationship with really any current players. I don't know what their feeling is on a lot of these guys. Now, I will say that there was a recent player list. There was a poll done where they asked who the most overrated and underrated players were in the NBA. And I do have 2 of the guys on the list that the players had on my list as well. So I think maybe it is a players thing too, but for me, this is just based on what the perception is from what I see on Twitter, what I see media write about or people talk about versus what I think about when I see this player play and I go, damn, that guy's really freaking good. So, like I said, I have 1 star player on this list that I'll start with, and he's at number 5 here that I think might be maybe the most controversial one I have. So starting at number 5, I have Damian Lillard. Now, this stems from our conversation yesterday, Scal. I think it was Kendrick Perkins asked me about something about what Damian Lillard was doing, and it was almost like a negative comment for him because of the way the Blazers were playing this year. I am about as high on Dame Lillard, I think, as maybe anybody in the entire league. I would say this, and I think I said this yesterday. I think Damian Lillard, behind Steph Curry, a healthy Steph Curry, I'm not sure there's another point guard I would take in the league behind him. Now, that you get into the LeBrons, the Lukas, James Harden I put in that category as well. I would put Damian Lillard on par with James Harden in this league right now as a scoring, dishing out passes guard. Now, neither of them play a ton of defense, but I think if you put Damian Lillard in that Rocket system, he would have just as good of numbers as James Harden does. So that's why I think Damian Lillard, he never gets talked about when we talk about the best point guards in the league or the best guard in this league. It's always like, oh yeah, and Dame Lillard. No. For me, Dame Lillard is number 2 in the league behind a healthy Steph Curry for me.
All right, so once again, just to be clear here, of your underrated players, he's not the 5th best underrated. It's not a who's better. No. He's underrated. This guy, like the first guy is really underrated and the 5th guy is underrated. But it had nothing to do with, like Damian Lillard might actually be better than the guy who's number 1 on your list, just to be clear.
Dame Lillard is the best player on this list. The best player on this list.
Okay.
But
I got you. All right,
I do think I put him at 5 because I do think he gets a lot of respect, but I think he deserves more respect. I think he is an elite level player in this league. I think he is arguably up. He and Steph Curry to me, and then I guess you could throw Trae Young in there, but I think he's miles better than Trae Young. Are the wild shot makers where they're from any logo from 30 feet out, 30 plus feet out. Those guys can hit a shot from anywhere. He's a good distributor. And let's be honest. And when I'm talking about James Harden and comparing him to Damian Lillard has taken his team as the best player on their team. Has taken his team as far as any James Harden team has gone in the Western Conference as well, to the Western Conference Finals. So while I don't think that was what the Blazers team was, I think Damian Lillard deserves credit as one of maybe the 2nd or 3rd best point guard in the entire league. So I'll move on here because I don't want to spend as much time on Damian Lillard. We can talk about it afterwards. Coming in at number 4, this is a funny one, and it's actually one of 2 Utah Jazz players I have on this list. Bojan Bogdanović, man. That dude, I know, because everybody wants to talk about Donovan Mitchell, and Donovan Mitchell, to me, is their best player. But Bogdanović allows them to do a lot of the things that they do. And now, it's difficult because I have Rudy Gobert on this list. We'll get to him in a little bit, but there are 3 Jazz players that I actually contemplated putting on this list. It was Bogdanović, it was Joe Ingles, and then I have Rudy Gobert on the list. For me, Bogdanović, they got him from the Pacers. He is a jack of all trades. He's a playmaker. He can knock down shots. He plays good defensively, and nobody talks about him. Nobody. Like it's insane.
Okay.
Like I know when people, it's probably because he plays in Utah and he played in Indiana. They're not 2 sexy markets. They're not sexy teams. But for me, as far as like number 2 pieces on a team, I would put Bogdanović up there with some of the better ones in the league. Now, obviously, Paul George and Anthony Davis, the elite of the number 2s. But if you're saying Donovan Mitchell is the best player on their team, I guess from an offensive perspective, Bogdanović is not far behind. I love that dude's game, and that's why I think he comes in at number 4 on this list. Go ahead.
Go ahead. One thing I want to bring up. So, just once again, this is for the regular season. This is right now, right?
Yeah.
Is he an underrated player? Is he an underrated player in the postseason? That will be determined. Go ahead.
Exactly. And by the way, this is mostly just like kind of what we've seen so far this year, but there's also some history that goes into it. But I'll get into that in a little bit. Coming at number 3, I got your guy Marcus Smart. Now I think the perception in the league on Marcus Smart has actually gone up this year, but it's still too low. For me, I think a lot of people still look at Marcus Smart as a glue guy, which he is. Like I think he is a glue guy, but he's like maybe the most elite glue guy in the entire league. But he's also possibly the best perimeter defender in the NBA. For a guy who's, 6'4", probably 6'3", 6'4", he's also a great block defender. He's a low he D's up some centers sometimes. He was a first-team all-defensive guy easily year in and out, and he's a good playmaker on offense. He could knock down open threes and shots when he gets hot. He's a little bit of a streaky shooter, but he's still shooting 34% from 3. And like when that bench unit for the Celtics, and you could talk more about it because you've seen him more than I have, but I look at Marcus Smart and I go, this is a guy who I don't care what capacity it is. I want him on every team that I put together. And, I know some people are like, oh, they gave him this should they pay him the money because, what is he really truly great at? Like, does he, he's great at winning. He understands winning intangibles. And I think there's still the perception in the league that he isn't like this elite guard. He is possibly a top 10 guard, at least shooting guard in this league scale. What do you think about Marcus Smart, number 3?
Yeah, I love your list so far just because I do believe that the 3 guys that you have named are all winners. I think that if I wanted to win a game, these are the guys I want on my team. And if we value winning, so Marcus Smart can play on all 30 teams in any game. It could be the NBA Finals and it could be the preseason game. It doesn't matter. He could be on. Yeah. And I would say Damian Lillard is in that conversation, and Bogdanović also is in the conversation. So no problem so far with your list. I'm glad you threw Marcus Smart a little bit of love.
All right, now the top 2 I think are actually pretty obvious. Number 2, I have Rudy Gobert. To me, Rudy Gobert, this is a fan perspective thing. I think the media understands how good, and I think coaches and I think players understand how good Rudy Gobert is, but I don't think fans do because he's not sexy. But if you look at the stats, they are able to do what they do defensively because of Rudy Gobert. Like he is a one-man paint wrecking crew. And you could look at the shot blocking numbers, you could look at what his percentage is against guys when they go to the rim. But I think even if you watch games with Rudy Gobert, there are guys that don't even want to go into the paint because Rudy Gobert is there. And I don't even know how you measure that statistically. He is as far as like a skill set in the league that there is such a massive gap between number 1 and number 2. Him being a guy that anchors your post defense, I'm not sure who's even close to him? I'm not even sure who is even number 2 necessarily. I know Hassan Whiteside wants to think that it's him, but Rudy Gobert to me allows the Jazz to do what they do and lock down people on defense. And he's an underrated offensive player too, Scal. Like his percentages at the rim, he's mostly a lob guy, but you look at his numbers, let's be honest, no one's going to ever mistake running a play for Rudy Gobert, but, between picking and rolling, finishing at the rim, he's an elite level guy at that as well. So that's why I have him at number 2, and it's mostly because the fans don't vote him in the All-Star game year after year, despite the fact that he's like a 2-time reigning, and potentially this will be his 3rd year winning Defensive Player of the Year in a row. So Rudy Gobert comes in at number 2 for me.
Some people would say that that they don't even not even the media or even players understand. So there's a play-by-play guy for the Charlotte Hornets who has compared any player who has ever won the NBA the NBA MVP had a PER of 22 and above. Rudy Gobert is the only player that has a PER that high that's not won any of those accolades. So for whatever reason, I don't know if there's like a flaw in the system somewhere where how he can navigate through this, but Rudy Gobert is that is an interesting stat. Guys like Wilt Chamberlain, Duncan, LeBron, like these guys have the same.
Yeah.
When you take the statistical and you add them all together, which I'm not a fan of that because I know there's some flaws to it, but he is, especially to me, one of the most. Now, the only thing about him is in the playoffs, he does get exposed, like against a James Harden type of player when he has to switch. Like he's a great defender against 99% of all plays and all players. There is like that small percentage where, man, does Quinn Snyder have to actually take him off the floor because of certain matchups? One would be Damian Lillard. Another one would be James Harden.
Yeah, you bring up the Rockets. There are times where he cannot play in that series, especially if they're not playing Clint Capella and they just go small. Like he doesn't have a role there. But I mean, I don't want to hold that against him too much because I mean, and this is a little bit of a regular season thing because I look at him and I go, they cannot be who they are without him. I think he might be. I mean, you could say Donovan Mitchell's their best player, but I think Rudy Gobert might be their most important player, which is saying a lot, I think, for the Utah Jazz. And number one shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's Khris Middleton, and I the list is because of Khris Middleton. And I don't know. I don't understand. Scal, help me understand this because I laid out the stats earlier. He's a 50, 40, 90 guy, averaging 20 points a game. He would be the fifth guy in the history of the NBA to ever accomplish that feat. He's doing it in limited minutes. He's playing on a team that's on pace to win 70-plus games. He's on one of the three best teams in the entire league, maybe the best team in the league, at least record-wise right now. He's the second best player, but for some reason, he just doesn't get the respect that I think he deserves. And, you know, he's a knockdown shooter. He's a good, versatile defensive player. And I wonder, is it because he was drafted in the second round? Is it because, like, he was kind of a throwaway in a trade with the Detroit Pistons a couple of years ago that brought him to Milwaukee in the first place? Is it because Giannis is so great and he's playing next to him that he's not put in that category? Like, I don't actually really have the answer. He's not a sexy player. I get that. But he is a really, you know, polished offensive player and a solid defensive player. So I guess, and maybe it's Milwaukee too. I don't understand why the rest of the league, and I say rest of the league because mostly it's fans, why they have not acknowledged this guy as an elite level player, especially in the Eastern Conference.
I would say because he hasn't had, you know, Klay Thompson, Game 6 against Oklahoma City. Like, he needs some of those where Giannis is struggling against Toronto last year, and Middleton's like, don't worry, I got you. So he hasn't had many of those moments. He's had moments where when the Bucks are flowing, he's flowing. When they don't need him, he puts up big numbers. But I think it's the all-time great performances. If I said to you, give me Kawhi Leonard's, give me LeBron, give me Paul George, give me any of these guys, Damian Lillard, you would be like, oh, remember that one game where he did this? Okay, give me a Khris Middleton game. Give me a. Remember Isaiah Thomas had 52 on when the birthday of his sister who died. Like, we have Isaiah Thomas's moments. Like, we have all-time moments by a lot of people. Where's Khris Middleton's all-time moments? And once he has some of those, and obviously they're probably more in the playoffs, once he has some of those, then he'll enter into that stratosphere. When things look like, you know, dire and you're about to lose and you're down by 13 heading into the fourth quarter and Middleton goes for 26 in the fourth quarter or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. We need a Khris Middleton moment. And that will enlighten the fans that this guy is not only solid and he makes sacrifices during the regular season and knocks down shots when he has to, but he can also deliver in those moments. And he hasn't had any of those moments. And a lot of those moments are in the playoffs. And I would think Bogdanović is another one. Is there a Bogdanović game out there? Oh, not really. Gobert is another one. He's had these shortcomings during the playoffs against certain types of individuals where it's hard for him to guard. So Middleton needs a Middleton moment.